Gonna turn the sound on. I'm gonna start that there video. I got it on the right quality this time, so
Nice. No, you'll be good.
it shouldn't suck up my entire hard drive. And starting as always with time and date. So, man, it is Tuesday, December 1st.
December 1st.
2020.
We made it.
Yeah, we're almost there, and it is 6:48 p.m.
Yeah.
This is our second episode, and we did the fastest of chats beforehand and decided we were going to talk about music today.
Yeah, we're talking about music today.
Which is something that plays a really important role in both of our lives, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You were up here practicing bass just now.
That's right, and you were downstairs practicing piano a little while ago.
Earlier on. How's the bass coming, buddy?
It's good, man. It's good. I had the bass for 10 years before I started taking it really seriously. I didn't bring it when I went to New York, or I wouldn't bring it with me everywhere, but that's changed now. This year during our lockdown, I've really tried to zero in on practicing the bass almost every day. So that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, and you haven't gotten every single day, but you've been really consistent on that.
Trying to do that, yeah.
And you're sounding way better now. You started actually doing real lessons.
Yes, that was the big change. Is that I'd fiddle around before, but I downloaded a set of lessons from a YouTube bassist that I really liked, and that's been helping a lot.
Perfect.
And then you've also been doing some music work this lockdown too.
Yeah, so I mean, I did. I sang a lot. Was a kid.
Right.
And before the lockdown hit, I was singing with a choir, which I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And as we both read up the other day, singing in choirs indoors is probably just about one of the worst things you can do.
Exactly.
Transferring the corona, so they are very rightfully closed up, especially since choirs are filled with the at-risk population.
Yes, absolutely.
I somewhat stand out as being an under 60. But no, I really loved singing as a kid. It took a long time for me to work into a bass voice. I took some lessons with my mother at a certain point.
Yeah.
And then there was a gap of about a year before I started going to this choir, and that made a huge difference. You did some singing with me as well.
Yeah, that was really fun. Honestly, because you had a good system down, I felt that I was getting better even within just a few lessons. It wasn't sounding like an angel or anything like that, but it was good. My breath was coming easier. I was able to just sustain my notes for a little longer.
You seem to be getting more confident too, and it's definitely a big part of
good.
it. It's harder to stand up a belt.
Yeah, exactly.
But I did piano lessons when I was very young in England, as you may or may not know. The current book I'm using is Thompson John's Piano Lessons. And he's one of the variations, old book, I think it's from the 50s or 60s. One of the variations of the book, I was looking it up on Amazon, and I realized that I'd had it back when I was a kid.
Oh, wow, that's cool. That's cool.
Because it's got this very distinctive, monsters on it flipping around. It's aimed at sort of, 5 to 7 to 8 year olds.
That's fun.
So somehow I'm really enjoying it. I'm not super far in. I'm about a quarter of the way through the first book.
Nice.
But it goes. It's 5 grades. I don't know if they're actually matched to sort of the conservatory grades.
Right.
But the 5th grade stuff looks hard as heck. So
Start out grade 1,
grade 1.
Absolutely.
I'm slugging through. I was doing a bit of a practice learning my notes today.
Nice.
Because I got to get that stuff down if I'm going to be learning the piano thing.
Definitely.
But when you were a boy, what's the sort of earliest things that you remember listening to?
When I was really young, I remember my dad putting on stuff like the Beatles in the car. Apparently when I was really, really young, which I don't remember too well. My parents used to listen to this rock station because they were in their early 30s, and they were listening to Alice, and it had all the alternative rock of the 90s that was playing.
Alice, they were here.
Yeah, it was here, I think.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
And they were playing like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and stuff like, Hootie and the Blowfish, all that kind of 90s stuff. So I think I like a lot of that music. So I think I kind of, by the process of osmosis sort of absorbed that, and then later came to it as a teenager and an adult. But I remember a lot of Beatles, and I remember Allman Brothers and Bruce Springsteen, and
my father's still pretty into the Allman Brothers.
He still likes the Allman Brothers and Bruce Springsteen, and Grateful Dead and things like that. How about you? What do you remember?
So I guess the earliest music thing I kind of recall, which comes because it's like a story that was told to me a lot when I was a kid, and that's me dancing along to a Kinks album, sort of age 3. There was this greatest hits Kinks album.
Nice.
That I couldn't find on the internet at one point, so I downloaded other greatest hits albums and pieced it together.
Made it yourself?
Because I could find the track list.
That's cool.
And it's iconic for me. And I remember I loved that album. And the song I was dancing to was da 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 da. Oh yes he is. Oh yes he is.
Oh, that one. Yeah. I know that one. Yeah. I can't remember.
Something of fashion. Oh, I can't believe I'm getting so much of the lyrics, but not the actual title. Whatever. But I remember being early on after I moved to. It's not that early on. 2 or 3 years after I moved to the States.
Right.
Because we were in the house we were in. That we sold at the end of our time in the States. I remember sitting on the bed trying to rip that CD onto my then laptop, and it wasn't working. So I remember being distraught about that.
Yeah.
But no, the Kinks are there. My father and my mother, like you, have different musical tastes.
Right.
They overlap in that. My father is happy to listen to a fair amount of classical music.
Right.
And my mother listens to exclusively classical music. She dips outside of it every now and then, I think, to appease me and my brother when we're in the car.
Right.
But apart from that, it's classical music. It's opera.
Just like my mom. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, it's interesting because my mom really doesn't listen to on her own anything but classical music and some choral music and opera, and then she'll tolerate a certain level of my music or my dad's music, and then
you get a certain number of songs.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're out of luck.
Usually it's a headache, and then she kind of assumes mission control and sort of sets everything back to classical music. But it's interesting, I grew up, as I'm sure you did, with just like a CD collection.
Yeah, of course.
And now if I look in my room, I don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I only have a small handful of CDs myself.
Exactly, right? I have them somewhere in storage, and a few have been given to me, but my computer doesn't even have a disk drive anymore. So it's just interesting noticing how that changes. Do you remember would you ever go to like a music store and buy CDs?
Yeah, every now and then. It wasn't super common. I don't think there was a music store in Whaley Bridge, which was the first town I was in growing up. But I remember a couple early trips in Philadelphia. Music kind of just appeared. The internet was a big part in music. My dad's very internet savvy, so and he was purchased music for iTunes and got music basically however you could.
Right.
And but in terms of going places, I never really went to concerts either as a kid. Even through my high school years, I've been to very few live performances. That being said, the ones that I have gone to have been classical.
Yeah.
With one or two minor exceptions.
Yeah.
believe I saw Elena Morissette with my father a couple of years ago.
Oh,
You know
yeah?
her? Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been fun.
It was fun.
She sound okay?
Yeah, she sounded good.
Okay, that's good.
I could be wrong about the name, but I hadn't really heard of her before I walked into the concert, so I'm just trying to pull it out.
Yeah.
But you know, some of my earliest musical memories are of going to a set of concerts that were aimed sort of at kids with my mother in Manchester, because Manchester has this beautiful symphony hall that I still sort of remember the front of. I've been there many years now. But they had these great little concerts that were sort of, you know, classical music but aimed at kids.
Right.
And the one I remember most well to this day is they did a video of Charlie Chaplin, of a Charlie Chaplin short, but in the original style, in an orchestra hall with an orchestra playing along.
Oh, that's fun. That would be fun.
That was great. That's the one that stuck in.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. So, let's talk about high school. Because we were both met in high school about 11 years ago now at this point. Maybe a little bit longer. And, you know, we both listened to some of the same things, but we were also listening to different things. So what do you remember listening to in high school?
So that's about when in that sort of time, and maybe it's the same for you, I don't know. But that's sort of when I'm starting to branch out a little bit and explore my own music.
Exactly.
Up until that point, I'd stayed pretty far away from my mother's classical music.
Right.
You know, there are a couple pieces of classical music at that point that sort of resonated for me. There's this classic Praetorian Mass that she used to listen to every Christmas, and that just sort of has very positive connotations for me. But in general, I was listening to my dad's stuff. He's into a whole mess of different things.
Right.
I heard my first rap quite early on for, you know, the sort of person we are, I guess, when I was a kid. He had a disc of The Sons of the Pea by Digital Underground.
Oh, nice.
Which is a great album I still love. And you know, has Digital Underground was a group of which the most famous was Shock G, who had like two other names. He played piano beautifully.
Right.
He was incredibly talented. But of course, there was a young up-and-comer in the group called Tupac, who later became a bit of a thing.
Yes.
I actually became a fan of Tupac through my cousin, who came to Philadelphia and was excited to get a chance to buy some rap records at a local store. He wandered in, and he picked up a couple CDs, and before he left back to the UK, I ripped them.
Nice.
So, you know,
that's fun, man. It's fun when you get exposed by your friends to stuff that your parents don't necessarily approve of.
No, I haven't actually answered your question, of course, yet. But sorry, let me chase this train of thought, and then I'll throw it back to you. But because I'm remembering one of my little brother's big things is old school hip hop. Right. And Tristan bought this rap album, this Tupac album, which at the time was, you know, out of date but not crazy out of date. It was just a greatest hits Tupac album. Like, you know, he'd been dead for like 7 or 8 years at that point, but you know, still pretty fresh. And Lisa heard about that, my mother's longtime partner, and she liked sort of old school hip hop, so she got together a disc of sort of classic hip hop. Nice. And had me make sure that I ripped it onto his computer, and I make sure that he got copies. But me, Hills, and Tristan were all, you know, ripping the same sort of stuff at the same sort of time. Right. And I'm not sure the old school hip hop thing ever got that deep with Tristan. You know, Lisa tried hard, and but it became a huge thing for Hills. Right. And you know, at this point, he's got a far better grasp of all of that old school hip hop than I do. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, I'll try and catch up. Yeah. But, it's not the moment right now. So to fast forward into high school, this stuff, the stuff with my mom is often quite detached because obviously I'm coming back in the summers and
Right.
going to visit her. So I think this is happening during high school as
Yeah.
well, but it's a little hard to tell. But during high school, I'm starting to branch into different sorts of music, and one of the
Right.
big things that I started to get into at the beginning of the wave, as it were, in sort of 2010, 2011, is electronic music and dubstep.
Right.
And that starts an interest in that side of music, and that continues basically to this day. And there was other stuff that I was touching on at that point, but in terms of the things that my family wasn't listening to, that was definitely way up there.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
To this day, I've never managed to actually get my mother to play electronic music on
she's
her
not a Skrillex
speakers.
fan? What's going
Well,
on?
so let me have it on for a little bit, but it's never at a volume that I think is acceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're not feeling the bass thump, then what's the point?
What's the point?
My dad's a huge influence on my music tastes and on my ability to listen to music.
Right.
And he sort of always made sure that I had a good pair of headphones.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I have my good hi-fi set up to thank for him.
Right.
To thank him for, and that's huge. It's just been a real sort of
Right.
cornerstone in life. So how about you, man? What were you listening to? I remember, of course, through the newspaper.
Yeah, man.
And through our own conversations that you were branching out into hip hop a lot.
That's right.
Nas, Illmatic.
Yeah, I loved. So I started kind of just researching. I think in high school my own music as well. I branched out a little bit before, but I really wanted to know more about hip hop culture. I just loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, kind of Toronto didn't have as big of a mainstream hip hop scene as it does now. Drake was kind of bubbling up, when we were in high school. He wasn't. I think his first album was 2008 or something like that. So, Toronto hip hop I was trying to get into, so I was listening to Chaos, who's a Kanon, some of these older Toronto hip hop artists, Cardinal Official as well, which was super fun, and then of course like Nas and a little bit of Biggie, a little bit of Tupac, Wu-Tang Clan I got into, and it's a lot of like the New York boom bap kind of rap, and then on the West Coast a lot of the more positive stuff like Far Side and so it was good. It was a good time. And then I was also listening to like a lot of rock music as well, like a lot of alternative rock like Soundgarden, Pearl Jam,
Rage Against the Machine.
I loved Rage Against the Machine, and Tool I was listening to a lot of in high school, which is pretty funny. Yeah, and so that kind of stuff, more the alternative rock. And then it was fun. We Gabe put together a newspaper that we had several really awesome issues of, and I think I wrote two music reviews or album reviews for
that.
You
did.
Did a Pearl Jam one, and then I did the Nas Illmatic one, which was super fun. So yeah, it's good, but I never really I started bass in high school. I think it was 16, so 10 years ago when I got my bass.
I remember you having instruments, yeah.
Yeah, I had
a bass and an electric, I think.
I have it, yeah, and my electric I still have. It's at my friend's. I let him borrow it so he could use it, but no, that stuff lasts a really long time, so you just kind of keep it in good condition, and you're good. But yeah, man, so when you kind of go off to university, like, did you get exposed to any new scenes, or did things shift?
There's a lot of pop in university.
Yeah.
My EDM experience was pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Just because there's a fair amount of partying, that sort
Right.
of thing.
Right.
And I started to listen to some more kind of mainstream electronic music.
Nice.
So that was interesting. I explored, because I'd been located pretty heavily on dubstep, on sort of just stumbling through and living practically, honestly, a ton off of just YouTube recommendations.
Right.
And just finding whatever I could find, and then in university I picked up things like Tiesto's podcast.
Yeah.
I started listening more seriously to house music.
Right.
I sort of broadened the electronic horizons.
Nice.
At a certain point, I found the more sort of experimental side of things. so IDM,
Right.
or that sort of stuff, and kind of, I'm always happy to try and listen to music.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's based on who you're around and who's
Right.
showing you tunes
Exactly.
and things. I remember it was in university when I was first introduced to Kendrick Lamar.
Right. Same. Yeah.
Through, actually, Lisa was the first one to be like, "Hey, have you heard of this Kendrick Lamar guy?" And my brother hadn't. I hadn't. And one of my roommates showed me All Right, I think.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get it. I
Right.
wasn't down with that shit at that point. And later on, I got more into his stuff, and I found one of the things I really found, and it's kind of driven my musical experience
Right.
in so many ways, is that patience and exposure
Yeah.
are just a huge amount of musical taste.
Yeah.
Until I had listened to enough rap, until I had
Right.
listened to a certain style of music, until I had actually sat down and absorbed a certain amount of it, your initial impressions and initial opinions of music, they really just don't seem to matter that
Right.
much.
No, exactly.
And it took a fair amount of time for me to learn that and just start forcing myself to really listen.
Yeah.
To sit down and to not turn off a song after the first 10-15 seconds if you're enjoying it. Listen to the whole song.
Yeah.
If there's an album that everyone sounds great, slug through the whole album.
Yeah, exactly. Appreciate the time it takes for an artist to compose an album. I find is really, really important. And I started, engaging with kind of online music just through single songs, whether that was a YouTube video or buying a song off iTunes. But it was later on that I started to listen to whole albums together and appreciate them for what they were, because that's when you get the deep cuts. That's when you find the stuff that people aren't talking about as much that you like. And then I like that, and you also just get a sense of kind of what sort of styles they're working with.
Yeah, and I like there's a definite sort of hump, or depression really, where I was listening to a lot of albums as a kid because you were getting things on CDs.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when the digital revolution took off, and I remember, oh man, what's that early one? LimeWire.
Yeah, LimeWire. You could download all the songs off of there. Yeah, man.
LimeWire and later other stuff as well, just your standard torrenting. But you had to know what you were looking for.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time you were just pulling individual tracks. You hear something, you'd be like, I like this, and grab it.
Yeah.
And then something like YouTube, which is a big part of my music listening experience, really reinforced that.
Yeah.
It's all about grabbing individual tracks.
Right, exactly.
Because you're only on one video at a time.
Exactly.
And then as I got more about sort of collecting music and holding on to music and being interested about narrative and trying to figure out where genres came from, and trying to sort of fit these, because I had sort of this patchwork of tunes.
Exactly.
And trying to fit them together, because that helps you figure out what music you like more.
No, exactly.
Once I started doing that, that brought albums back into the fore, and they're super important to just see an actual artist's vision.
Definitely.
It's hard to get a real vision across in 4 minutes.
Definitely. I also find like location helps you sort of soak up the sounds of a particular genre or a particular album or a particular artist. So I remember, when I was in Ohio during school in the Midwest, that's where Nine Inch Nails started and industrial music started. It makes a lot of sense when you go and look around the place, because the music's brooding, it's depressing. It's, started out by them going into factories and finding mechanical sounds and making loops and synthesizers had just come out, and they were playing with them and putting them all together. And then when you drive through, it's like through the Midwest and all these burnt out towns, you realize, okay, this makes sense why this is so depressing and so sad and so mechanical and broken down. And it's cool to be in a kind of location and sort of absorb the sounds of the artists that arose there or from there or were writing about there at the time.
It really reinforces that. No, I think reading also fits into music for me as well. I still there's this album I still listen to. Bengali Bantam Youth by Black Star Liner, which is this English but with Indian roots group. I believe that's right. That made electronic music, sort of trying to branch the English electronic scene, which is remarkably deep.
Yeah, absolutely.
With these sort of Indian roots.
Nice.
And I love that album, and I remember reading So You Want to Be a Wizard, and having that album in the background, and there's this moment where they're in this sort of parallel universe where cars are human and they're angry and twisted because they're being controlled by this evil thing.
Right.
And they're running around and they're searching for a book of light or something.
Definitely.
There's a MacGuffin to make everything better.
Right.
But then moving through New York, I believe, which is a city that I didn't know very well at the time at all. But they're moving through New York, and it's brooding and it's oppressive, and there's a track on the album that's exactly like that.
Nice.
And I was reading, and they just sort of lined up.
Yeah.
And now every time that I think of the book, I think of the track, and now I think of the track, I think of the book, and it was just so perfect. When things hit like that, it's really remarkable.
Absolutely, man. It's like when we were reading Neuromancer together, and you have your Neuromancer playlist we put on, which is awesome. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I really that was an experience I channeled when I was trying to make that chunk of music.
Yeah, absolutely. Certain books like Neuromancer that are very visual and just visceral, they lend themselves to music being played. Especially like that cyberpunky atmosphere, because you could imagine that those are the kind of sounds of the city that are wafting through the lives of the characters as they wander around.
It's the sort of music they might be listening to.
Yeah, I remember there's one track on it by Bershregard, I think, by DJ Shadow. Right. With Nils Fromm.
I don't know how to pronounce that one either.
Something like that. But
it's just sort of clashing and aggressive.
Super good and just very cyberpunky. And I remember like first listening to that because that album came out when I was in New York, and I was just I would take it and I'd just go downtown, which is really downtown Manhattan, which at night with everything glowing is super cyberpunky. It's pretty cyberpunky as it gets in the U.S. and Canada, I would say. And just this kind of locking that image into my mind. So that's what came up when I read Neuromancer and that song came up. It was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, man.
It's fun. Yeah, man. Oh, man. And then, like just trying to think, I think your relationship with music grows, and I think, I'm at the point now where I really want to get good at an instrument so that I can kind of create music. At one point, that would be really nice. Yeah. No,
I'd like to be able to be better at an instrument too.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a language of itself.
Exactly.
And that's something that I got when I was singing.
Right. Yeah.
And in a way, a huge amount of it is confidence, and there's the ability to actually perform. And with your voice, especially, I was started very young singing, and I was recognized that I was a good young soprano.
Right.
Which means, as a boy, obviously, you got a window, man. So, there was real effort put into making sure that I was singing. And I remember doing soloing when I was a kid. And my earliest solo was probably 5 years old.
Wow.
I sang once in Royal David City in a church.
That's awesome, man.
And in a voice that I clearly no longer have.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But that sort of performance aspect of music is really important. It's a part of music that a lot of people miss, and if you're just sort of passively listening to music all the time, you don't end up with that kind of feeling of what it's like to get in front of a group of people and just go.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember in grade school at one point I had what was essentially a duet, but we weren't singing together for most of the parts. It was kind of two solos with a little bit of duetting in there, and I fluffed it. I got halfway in. I knew the parts, knew it really well. I got up on stage and something just sort of missed.
Yeah.
But I just kept going.
Yeah, man.
And I was fine.
Yeah.
And I finished my bit, and then it was the other girl's part to come in.
Right.
And she stumbled because she had known that I fucked it up.
Right.
And obviously, I had known that I fucked it up too, but nobody else did.
Right.
And I still feel a little sorry to this day that I put her in that position.
It happens though, man.
But the fact is, I'd sung one line in place of another line.
Right.
Unless you have intimate knowledge of that exact track, nobody in the audience knows.
No, exactly. But it's fun. It's good to get used to embarrassing yourself on stage a little bit. I've done that a few times for sure, and I always find that it's not as bad as you think, and it's part of the process of it, right? It's part of the process of becoming
you're always going to mess something up.
You're always going to mess something up, Sometimes spectacularly, sometimes not. I've done both. I've done both for sure. Yeah, man, but it's good, But I think if you don't learn how to fail on stage and then pick yourself back up in the best way possible, you're never gonna be able to excel, because you've got to take that risk every time you step up. You prepare, you do your best with whatever it is, but you're going to stumble sometimes. You just got to rate yourself.
their confidence, confidence that fits into music.
Yeah, exactly.
Confidence that fits into performance. A lot of people who sing suck.
Yeah.
But they have the confidence to get up there and do it, and to put it on record and to put it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's when sort of bad singing becomes a style.
Right.
Because they had the confidence to make those tracks and go for it.
Exactly.
I find it really hard to this day to listen to Bob Dylan.
Yeah. He's a terrible singer.
His voice sounds like
God,
claws on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
But he's an incredible lyricist,
Yeah.
and he has huge confidence.
Exactly.
And he just gets up there and makes album after album
Exactly.
after
He
album.
just puts it out, puts in the work.
And I've got huge respect for all that sort of stuff, and I like a lot of Bob Dylan covers.
Yeah, exactly. I like people singing Bob Dylan, for him.
I find it hard to listen to him at a certain point. I've gotten better over the years at sort of adapting to different tonal qualities.
Yes.
That's just a polite way to put it. And at some point, hopefully, Bob will make his way onto the list.
Yeah.
But singing is really important to me, sort of. And I grew up in a clear classical tradition of music, and singing hymns, singing
right,
in sort of clear Western ways.
Yeah.
And my ear is sort of attuned to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely. Yeah, man. No, it's interesting. So, going forward now, do you see yourself doing some more piano, but also singing? Do you see kind of putting together a project, maybe, or are you just gonna?
Yeah,
keep kind of sort of going back.
There are things in my life for which I really feel like I have to prepare.
Yeah.
For which I have to produce things, for which I have to make products.
Yeah.
And commit to projects.
Yeah.
Music is for me.
Yeah.
I'm playing piano now because it's fun. I'm enjoying it.
Exactly.
I would really like to get to a point where I'm good enough so that I can impress people with my ability to play piano.
Right.
But if I don't get there, that's okay.
Yeah.
Singing I'm already quite good at.
Right.
And I enjoy it a ton, and it's something that I want to make sure makes its way into my routine at some point.
Right.
But again, it's a me thing.
Right.
Music for me is intensely personal. one of the things we haven't talked about is in terms of creating music, the thing that I've done the most is mix.
Right.
Apart from sing, it's
Right.
probably mixed more than sing.
Right.
And that is as well. It just came from a desire to make a piece of music that I could enjoy.
Right. Exactly.
I started doing that in early on in university using Audacity. Technically, the first time I mixed something was for our graduation in Abelard.
Right.
Because there was a grad mix and there were a ton of songs, and I just started putting things together, and all of a sudden I was chopping, and things were kind of happening. And I remember having a real concise sort of first 15 minutes, and the rest it was taking forever. Mixing takes a long time. Even now that I'm good at it, I find really nailing transitions, if I'm looking into the future, I always put aside at least an hour for it to get one transition down perfect. And sometimes you hit your flow and you go bang, 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 bang. And sometimes you don't, and you sit there for 3 hours and you just don't manage to make two tracks sit together.
Right.
But that stuff's all about, me just hearing a piece of music.
Right.
And going, oh, that sounds like this.
Right. And putting them together,
I think it would be cool if I overlaid those two songs.
Right.
And if I've done that, you've gone from one song to the other song.
No, exactly.
And you're two songs into a mix at that point. And a lot of mixes don't make it past two songs.
Right. No, it's true.
But that sort of constant production, that constant just making something in music. One of the nice things about it being digital and about it being actual sort of projects on a computer is that it sits there. The when you're jamming at home, unless you're recording it, it doesn't sit there.
Exactly.
You've got to remember it. You got to make a mark of it. You got to record it in some way in order for it to stick around. So that was one of the things that really appealed to me about mixing music.
It stays there. Staying power, exactly.
You built, I built up a catalog. I had a big chunk, like a folder just sort of filled with different chunks, and some things were full mix, and most of it was just I have an idea, I'm going from this song to that song. And I find music, it's hugely important. I enjoy listening to music. I'm okay with listening to music over and over and over and over.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is an essential part of the mixing process. An essential part of practicing and learning an instrument.
Exactly.
I when I was a kid, I found it very difficult to sit down and practice because often I felt like my head was getting ahead of my fingers. And the only way I have to combat this now, we were talking about this the other day, was that I'm better at sort of recognizing what's going on inside me physiologically, and I've set up a process now where whenever I'm playing, I'm playing these very simple pieces right now. They get more complicated over time. But I sit up straight before I start every piece. I take a deep breath. And I let the fingers come down. And when I fully exhale, then I touch the keyboard. Take a small light breath, and then I start to play.
Exactly.
And that steadies me. When I was a kid, I didn't have that sort of process, and I didn't understand how those sort of things worked. So I would mess up, I would try and fix it, I would get frustrated. I would end up just doodling around on the piano instead of actually doing my work. And learning that if you can put a process there in place to sort of catch you. If you can ritualize, if you can give yourself a little bit of a ritual when you're doing it that focuses on how you're feeling and make sure that you're avoiding the feelings that make your performance worse, then all of a sudden you just feel like you're doing way better.
Absolutely.
And it can be as simple as you like for you. I know that you catch yourself just sort of jamming along the tracks a lot. It can be as simple as just not stopping doing that. I haven't stopped messing around with the piano. But finding a way to keep it in a box.
Exactly. Stopping.
So that you can focus on the things that make you improve. Because you're never going to be perfect at bass. You're never going to be perfect at piano. And for me, at least, I just want to keep getting better at the things that I'm doing.
Absolutely.
If I'm spending 15 minutes a day on piano, I want to make sure that those 15 minutes are making me better at piano.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I was spending 2 hours on piano, then maybe I would only need 10, 15, half an hour in order to actually make me better.
Exactly.
And then the other hour and a half could just be messing around doing whatever I wanted. But these days, I'm happy just with a small amount of time, and I sort of enjoy the learning process more than I did when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
So what's the question we're asking at the end of these things?
What do we want people to look? What do we want to say to ourselves?
Yeah, so I feel like for you, you want to be better at bass.
Yeah, man.
But like what, in the future, what are you?
Yeah, man. I want to
set some goals. Make a prediction. Like do something.
I want to be part of a band. At some point in the next. If I'm looking back for 5 years, I want to either be currently part of a band or have been part of a band. I also still want to record a few hip-hop songs with Ian and a couple other people, so I definitely want to do that. That would be a goal. Doesn't have to be a full album or anything, but just at least 3. Just get 3.
3 songs?
Yeah, 3 songs.
That's a good one, man.
How about you, man?
I would really... I have on my wall right now, I have 3 things in the music section, and that is vocal, and that is bass, and that is piano.
Nice.
As keys. There's also production stuff in there. I would like to have some basic production skills in the future. But I don't need to be fabulous at keys, but I just want to be good. I just want to be good at piano. The vocal stuff, the goal is simply just to make sure that 5 to 10 years from now I'm still doing this stuff. It's still a part of my life. That's
Absolutely.
super important to me. For that one, there's no real I'll improve slowly over time, but I'm happy with where I am. I feel like I sing well.
Nice.
I just want to make sure it's still there. And then the bass for me is kind of a gateway into other stringed instruments. I would like to be pretty good at bass. But the real goal there is not to excel at bass. But to give me just the basic knowledge required to be decent at bass, and then maybe be decent at violin or viola, or one of my huge goals for a long time is to eventually maybe get access to a harp. Harps are the coolest.
Really cool.
So making some inroads into stringed instruments, or even blown ones, wind winds.
Sounds good, though.
Of brass.
Sounds fun. That'll be good, man. You got it.
Thank you, buddy. All right, good to talk to you as always.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
I'll see you next time.
We'll wrap this one up.
Let's not.
Get this guy.
You were actually doing that all the time, yeah?